another show of Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. Pleased to have you tuning in. Got another good show lined up for you this week. I know you'll think so after viewing it. Bill Happel Jr. going to be joining us. Yes, that Bill Happel. James Vandenberg's business partner. James on vacation, so now we got the wide receiver instead of the former Hawkeye quarterback. We'll have a former Hawkeye wide receiver. Oh, by the way, we'll talk about Charlie Jones. What a day he had returning kicks and also catching the ball for the Iowa Hawkeyes. So we'll get Bill Happel's perspective on that. But then we'll also talk to David Eickholt, our usual show contributor with 24/7 and CBS Sports, Hawkeye Insider. Also, Sean Bock will join us again this week. We were going to have Keith Duncan join us this week. He's going to join us next week. Oh, by the way, we'll talk some Torrey Taylor. You better believe that. The Big Ten this week, Special Teams Player of the Week. So we'll be talking with Keith next week. That being said, as you can see on the screen, I've got Craig and Stacy Schroeder with fightwithflash.org or Fight with Flash Foundation via Facebook. Look at the grin on those two. What a tournament it was at Fight with Flash last week. What a golf tourney it was. I saw the pictures online. Craig, Stacy, we're going to talk about it online in a few minutes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Can't wait. Thank you both so much. Join us at DaveO'HaraSports.com or again, FightWithFlash.org, and we'll have all the details for you. Back with more and Bill Happel Jr., the former Hawkeye receiver, in just a few moments. Welcome back to Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. As you can see on the screen, my buddy Bill Happel Jr. joining us. As we talked about in the past, Bill Happel joining us because James Vandenberg is out this week, so we've got the former quarterback and James Vandenberg partnered in business with Bill Happel Jr., the former Hawkeye wide receiving great. So Bill, first and foremost, thanks for joining us. You've joined me many times on radio in the past, and now you're joining us on TV, so we love having you via Zoom. All of Bill's information was at the bottom of the screen earlier and will be at the end of this segment as well, along with all of my information. So Bill, first and foremost, as always, thanks for joining us. But secondly, how's everything going with you, my friend?
It's great. We're having a ball up here, and I hate to give James credit, but it's actually been a lot of fun since he's joined us the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, we don't want to give him too much credit because we
don't
want to build his ego up too much. But Bill, I've talked to you many times, as we mentioned off the air, and you got a great story for us at the end of the segment about your dad and you when you played in the Rose Bowl. And obviously, again, all your information will be at the bottom of the screen at the beginning and end of this interview. But I did want to let everyone know Bill played from 82 to 85, or that Rose Bowl of 86. So we've got a lot to catch up with Bill on. And we'll have Bill on throughout the season as well. His roommate in college and former Hawkeye quarterback, great, and NFL quarterback, Mark Vlasic. I've had Mark on many times, so definitely looking forward to catching up with you. But Bill, let's get to it this week, man. Hawkeye big victory over the Iowa State Cyclones, and 27-17 wasn't even indicative of how close this game wasn't. But we got to start with Charlie Jones, and you've got a great punt return story when you returned punts at the end of your career, towards the end of your career. But Charlie Jones, James and I talked about this a couple weeks ago, what a great job he's doing on the return game special teams. But that catch in the end zone, nice pass by Petrus, but Charlie really laid himself out. Speak about that, if you would, from a wide receiver perspective, Bill.
Well, I think it just came down to every part of that play was good. He ran the right route. He saw the safety, bit underneath, and he got inside the corner. And when it came to catching the ball, he just laid out, and it was just great concentration. So the DB was really on him. I thought he almost made contact early, but just great concentration, and that's what you want in your receivers.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So when we talk about possession-type receivers, which you were, and Charlie Jones is really making his mark as that, but then when you can go deep like that, and obviously you've got Tyrone Tracy in that wide receiving room, and the tight ends, of course, and Laporta and Lachey, so a lot of weapons for Spencer to go to. But let's talk about this when you got to try to make your mark from the return game. And I do want to have you give us a little history besides you and your dad at the Rose Bowl. Talk about that game against Minnesota, your junior year, a tough loss up in Minnesota. But you still hold the Big Ten record. You told me this off the air, so I can't take credit for this knowledge. But as far as we know, this is still a Big Ten record. You had a 95-yard punt return. So you hold that even over the Iowa team record over a great like Tim Dwight. So talk about that, if you would, for us, please.
Yeah, well, it was toward the very end of my junior season, and they were looking to make a switch back there at punt return, and I did it in high school. And so I think they really just wanted me back there to catch the ball, and they didn't really have any thoughts of me actually running one back. And so it was that first game, and the punter kicked a school record 89-yard punt that rolled all the way down to the 5-yard line, and I had to run back from my own 40 to pick it up. And you're not supposed to pick it up inside the 10, but my first game. I'm still an idiot. Don't know what I'm doing. And I think the defense was pretty tired running all the way downfield. So I just picked it up and it probably took me about 40 seconds to run the 95 yards because I'm not very fast, but made it all the way. So the sad part was later on in the game, I muffed a punt bounced off my shoulder pad and we ended up losing. So I never really got to celebrate that much. But, when I'd watched Tim Dwight over the years, I thought, boy, he's going to get that record. And because he's the only one crazy enough to return one inside the 10-yard line. And as I said to other people, I said, you either have to be an idiot or crazy. And I was the first one and Tim was the second, but I don't think he ever got to 95.
Well, that lends new definition to outkicking your coverage. It was positive in this respect, too, as you chuckle with me. But, hey, Bill, let's talk about the wide receiver position here at Iowa. And you talk about your playing days. Kirk Ferentz, obviously part of that Hayden Fry coaching tree, and you played for Hayden Fry. But you had quite the taskmaster in Bill Snyder, former K-State great coach, but his claim to fame being the OC offensive coordinator at Iowa during Hayden's early years. And I was telling a story earlier today about you. You've always told me, and Mark Vlasic, a lot of your teammates of the past would always say about Snyder, whenever you felt you ran the perfect route and you were known as a route runner, a possession receiver, what was the one thing Coach Snyder always said whenever you thought you got it right? What were you assured he was going to say?
I was assured he was going to say I didn't, that I had something small to work on. I was a half a step short on the route, or, I didn't do a certain thing on my break. And I think, quite honestly, looking back, that was so important for someone like me. And of course, my running mate was Scott Helverson, and we're kind of very similar guys. And so I think it became, that was our advantage is we did the little things right. And we ran routes and, the way the quarterback expected it. And so we had a good camaraderie with Chuck, and he knew exactly where we were going to be. And I think if we didn't do everything particularly perfect, we weren't good enough athletes to really separate from others.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you said that Snyder would always say, too, let's run it again, let's get it right. And you mentioned that with Chuck Long, and that's what with Spencer Petras. We talked about timing, and even with Amir Marset last year and now in the NFL, and Brandon Smith moving on, and now you've got to work with Tyrone Tracy and some of these guys. And I see a lot of Charlie Jones in you, or you and Charlie Jones. I think there's a lot of similarities. Do you see that same thing?
Well, I quite frankly, I think Charlie's probably a step ahead of me as an athlete. I certainly would give him that credit. But the similarity that I see starting to develop is just, it looks like Spencer's getting comfortable. I know Spencer's real comfortable with Sam Laporta, and we've all seen that he looks to Laporta, but he needs to get comfortable with these receivers. And I think he is with Charlie, and hopefully this next few games, he'll develop that rapport with the other guys as well, because I think they'll need that going in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Then you mix in a nice running game with Goodson, and then you can spell him with Ivory Kelly-Martin. You've got a nice mixture there. Even Potabon once in a while will run up the middle, and a nice lead back. So there are a lot of similarities of those teams from back in your day to there with Chuck Long, and I'm not saying Spencer Petras is Chuck Long by any stretch, but you do see that. And then you've got the great defense on this side of the ball, and look what the Hawk defense did this last week. We got to talk about that, as well as Torrey Taylor. We're going to talk to Keith Duncan, recent former Hawkeye kicker, and still does a lot of punting and kicking camps, and Torrey Taylor being the Big Ten Player of the Week this week. And what a job he's done this year so far, besides the average of over 50-plus yards. But great job of keeping the opponent inside the 20-yard line. But you know what it's like to play with a great defense, and look what this Hawk defense, opportunistic, did this week. Matt Hankins, 2 interceptions, had another interception by Benson, and a fumble recovery touchdown, scoop and score by Jack Campbell. You can certainly relate to a strong defense as well, Bill, from your era.
Yeah, when I was a senior in high school, was the 81 team that went to the Rose Bowl. And that's what these first 2 games really remind me of that team, because that defense was crazy good. And the offense was always just kind of trying to not to get in their own defense's way, don't make mistakes. And they had a guy named Reggie Roby that would flip the field. So these first 2 games remind me so much of the early season in 1990 or 1981 when they beat Nebraska and UCLA. It was all defense. The offense did just enough, and the kicking game was phenomenal. And so as we went along and I got there the same thing my freshman year. The remnants of that 81 defense was still there, and they were good. They let a young Chuck Long, come along. And then by the time, we started toward the end of my career, my junior, senior year, of course, we had Chuck and Ronnie Harmon, a lot of weapons on offense. So we were a little more balanced. But that 81 team reminds me a lot of this team.
Yeah, when you got a guy like Andre Tippett, NFL Hall of Famer Deluxe, leading that defense back then, that's not a big stretch. And I appreciate the insights in that. And next time when we have you on, Mark Vlasic, your teammate, as I mentioned, has got to join us because he tells a great Reggie Roby story when he was coming to Iowa his first day, and you're smiling. You know the story. So, viewers, I want you to stay tuned because Reggie Roby, if you don't know who that is, if you're too young or don't know Hawkeye history, football history, you got to look up Reggie Roby. Came into Iowa as a parade All-American, a wide receiver, and Hayden saw him kick and punt, right, Bill, and said, "You're not playing wide receiver, son. You're punting and kicking," and that's it, and was a great punter in the NFL for many years and unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. But let's do this, Bill, in the last minute or two I have with you. You got to tell us the Rose Bowl story. Of course, you're a legacy recruit. You played at Iowa. Your dad played and coached at Iowa. You're a Cedar Rapids Wash kid. The Happel name throughout Cedar Rapids. Athletics is through and through. But you've got to share that. And every time I have you on radio, I've heard this 100 times and I never tire of it. For the new viewers, Bill, you gotta, I hate to bore you, but tell us that great story of you and your dad at the Rose Bowl after you lost your senior year and that Rose Bowl of 85, 86, please.
Well, I'll preface it by saying, the background you said, my dad played in the heydays in the 1950s, and he did score a touchdown in the first Rose Bowl, the January 157 win. And so when I got to Iowa, to be honest with you, I didn't know if they just recruited me because of my dad or if I'd ever even play or not. Fortunately, I did, get on the field and was able to go to the Rose Bowl just like my dad. And we were ranked number one for 6-7 weeks and had high expectations going into the Rose Bowl. And, it didn't work out. But I did get the touchdown in the Rose Bowl. And so, afterwards I was walking out of the locker room and I think my dad really wanted to console me, thought I'd be really down, but
sure.
I felt after that game, I was down that we didn't win, but I realized that it's over. And I thought offensively we played, pretty well. And I was just proud of our season at the time. But he thought I was really down. So he came up to me and he said, "Son, you tied me." And I said, "What do you mean I tied you?" And he said, "Well, you scored a touchdown in the Rose Bowl and I scored a touchdown in the Rose Bowl." And I said, "Well, yours was only 7 yards. Mine was 13. And he kind of looked at me funny and said, "Well, at least we won the damn game." So, he consoled me until the point he realized that I was trying to one up him. And then he laid the hammer down.
That competition never ends, even father and son. You're a big-time competitor like your dad. I love that story and never tire hearing it. Bill, thank you so much again. He's Bill Happel. You see all his information at the bottom of the screen with RBC Wealth Management and Corridor Investment Group, a business partner with James Vandenberg, who usually joins us, and the wide receiver, former Hawkeye wide receiver Bill Happel, sitting in for the former Hawkeye quarterback James Vandenberg this week. And again, you see all my information at the bottom of the screen as well. Hawkeyed here at Dave O'Hara. Bill, we'll catch up with you very soon. Thanks so much for sitting in for James. And we've got to have you and Vlasic on as the season comes out. We got some great stories. Reggie Roby will remember that story. I'll tell it next time with you and Mark Vlasic. How's that sound?
I'd love to do it. Thanks for having me, and go Hawks.
Very much. You're very welcome, and thank you, Bill, and go Hawks indeed. Back with more to close out the show with Hawkeye Insider David Eickholt first, and then we'll close out the show with Sean Bock, Hawkeye Insider. Got a lot to talk about with the Hawkeyes past and upcoming. So back with more Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara, in just a few moments.
In farming, everybody knows relationships drive the industry. And with Merschman Seeds, you've got a friend in the field. Hi, this is Joe Merschman. We're the friend that delivers with extraordinary speed. We're the friend that shares knowledge and innovation. We're the friend that cares about your yields and profits. And we just happen to have the most advanced seed technology in the industry. When you choose the best seed, you also get the best people. Merschman Seeds, your friend in the field.
Hi, I'm Joel from Tice Chevrolet. We've lived through some very interesting times the last few months. Ensuring everyone's safety is more important than ever. That is why we are participating in the Chevy Clean program. At your request, we will pick up your vehicle, service it, and return it after we've cleaned it using the current CDC guidelines. This is just another way to work towards exceeding your expectations. So give us a call and let us show you what it means to be part of the Tice Automotive family.
Welcome back to Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. As you can see on the screen, next to me, my buddy David Eickholt, HawkeyeInsider.com. All his information at the bottom of the screen, along with mine. David, congratulations, my friend. You inked the deal, and now all the speculation. I've known this for a while, but now it's official. Take it away.
Yeah, so I will be staying in Iowa City covering the Hawkeyes for 24/7 Sports for at least another couple of years. And I mean, there's some big news regarding my partner Sean Bock, which we'll get to in the next segment. But very happy to be here and just keep the train rolling.
Indeed, and let's do that. So as the train rolls through, I do my usual and get the heck out of the way. We'll tee you up here. We had Kirk Ferentz presser today with the players. Not a lot said, but touch a little bit for us on Kent State, and let's get to the landscape of where the Hawkeyes are on the national scene. Number 5 right now in the AP, but we got a lot to get to.
Yeah, Kent State, first of all, I mean, probably one of the more up-tempo offenses in the country, Dave. About 15 to 18 seconds or so between snaps. So the Iowa defense is going to be very experienced, but I'm interested to see how it's going to be with, obviously, the heat. That's going to be a factor, again, I think, this upcoming Saturday. Kent State really hasn't they played Texas A&M. Texas A&M, I'm not really sold on them quite yet. They lost 41-10, but they beat Virginia Military Institute. Found out that was a school. Didn't know that was a thing.
Glad I could help. Sure.
They beat them 60-10. Look for a lot of just more up-tempo stuff, a lot of running, a little bit of passing. But I will say, I think this is going to be a very good opportunity for Iowa's defensive line to really, really grow.
You know, when you talk about the Iowa State game, and then we look at a national scene, to your point about the defensive line, talk to Bill Happel. I did the segment before this about teams of the past, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but it's hard not to if you're a Hawkeye football fan of the past to see some of the great defenses. And let's go recently with the Josie Jewells, Parker Hesse's, AJ Epenesa's, and this defense is something else, David. When you take a look at some of the guys who are performing right now, not just Riley Moss, not just Hankins, you got your linebackers, the defensive line, pressure all around.
Yeah, I think, I will say, I think Iowa's back seven is probably the best back seven in the country, or at least up there with, I think Georgia has more of a dominant defensive line, which really drives that defense. Then, Alabama is going to be at the top of everything except kicking and punting. Let's be real.
Because they don't do it well.
Exactly. I will say this, though. I think Justin Jacobs really made a statement on Saturday. I think I've been singing his praises basically since he got on campus. But that forced fumble, that scoop and score by Jack Campbell, this defense is legit. And I know a lot of people are pointing back to, the 1981 team when they made the Rose Bowl. People look at what happened when they made the Rose Bowl back in 2015. I will say this. The thing that I think there's a strong parallel between the 15 team and this year's team, whenever you hear the 15 players talk about it, they say we had such good chemistry with one another. They had good off the field relationships. They really vibed well with one another. My biggest takeaway from this team in 2 weeks is how close they are. They constantly talk about they love, they always feel supported. They really mesh well on the field together, and I think that's something that really cannot be overstated. So I think everything is going to be set up for potentially a special season. But I will say this, Dave, I think this is a very important point that team in 15 did not get the national praises until about week 8 or 9. This is week 3 they're coming up to. They have the entire season with these sort of expectations now. So still a young team. They got to be able to handle it.
That's exactly where I was going when I started to point and say, let's take a look at what this team has done in that short period of time compared to the 15 team. Phil Parker's being anointed as, the coordinator du jour of college football. But David, about a minute and a half here, and I really want you to get into the landscape now of college football and the Hawks. And you said something during break, and you and I talk about this a lot off the air about the camaraderie that the team has. And he's nailed it from the beginning, viewers, as you've heard him say it on the show. But off the air, I can validate how you've talked about that. But let's talk about this with the landscape you just said to me off the air, and I want to bring it on the air. This is becoming the epicenter of college football, and I don't think that's hyperbole.
I did get some criticism on from fans and even former Iowa players when I said this is Iowa's Super Bowl to this point. Normally, I know Tyler Goodson said it's the Super Bowl for Iowa State, but my whole point behind it, Dave, when I said that was if they won, which they did, everybody's looking at Iowa now. Now Iowa has to perform up to expectations every year. They got to stay in the rankings, and that's why I think it was such a big step, because guess what? Nobody's talking about Iowa State. In fact, a lot of the national analysts said they never want to hear about Iowa State again. So people are so focused on what Iowa's going to do, and there's going to be a lot of criticism that people are going to hear, especially about the offense, 125th in yards per play. That has to dramatically go up. So these next 2 weeks, Dave, it's going to be the most important 2 weeks for this offensive line and for this offense. They got to get momentum before Big Ten plays start.
Well stated. Iowa State drops to 15th, Iowa up to number 5. So there you go. No more number 9, no more number 10. David, great stuff as always. Thanks so much, my friend.
I appreciate it, Dave. Thank
You're
you.
very welcome. Hawkeye Insider David Eickholt, all his information at the bottom of the screen along with mine. And as David mentioned, Sean Bock from Hawkeye Insider will join us to talk about his new deal and to talk about some recruiting for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Back with more Hawkeye with me in just a few moments.
Hi, I'm Joel from Tice Automotive Family. We're living through some of the most interesting and challenging times many of us have ever seen. Knowing who you can rely on is more important than ever. Many of us turn to our families to get us through, and the same holds true here. From our fair, upfront pricing to exceptional service after the sale, we truly want to exceed your expectations. So give us a call or stop by and let us show you what it means to be part of the Tice Automotive family.
Who do you trust to produce the best yield? A seed company that's chasing technology or a seed company that's writing the book on it? Hi, this is Joe Mershman. Mershman Seeds has been treating soybeans for decades, long before it was commonplace. We're the leader in technology, introducing Mershman Seeds' latest advancement in seed treatment, with an added fungicide to help produce a faster, more even emergence every single time. Who can you trust with your yields? Mershman Seeds, your friend in the field.
Welcome back to Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. As you can see on the screen, my buddy Sean Bock, Hawkeye Insider. First of all, Sean, congratulations. You're now full-time with 24/7, part of the CBS Sports Network. We talked to David about that earlier. You guys inked your deals. Congratulations. And you're back for a third time. You're sitting in for Keith Duncan, who will join us next week, so no pressure. But hey, welcome back, and thanks again for joining us. How you doing, man?
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Yeah, it's nice to, have everything signed and just be official. It's been great.
Now you finished being a student in December, so now you can really get to live in here.
Not officially,
yes.
Still kind of have to get over that hurdle, hopefully, but we should be fine.
Looking forward to it. So, Sean, let's get right to it. We got a lot to discuss. David and I talked about the Iowa big victory over Iowa State. Of course, Bill Happel Jr. and I did as well. Iowa facing Kent State upcoming. We've discussed that. So let's get to some recruiting. David and I reference you quite often in this show about recruiting, and obviously David handles that as well. But you've got a couple of sightings you saw on the sideline. The Indiana game, we'll go back a couple of weeks. But let's start with football recruiting first and who Iowa's really focusing on. And then we'll mention a couple of basketball recruits as well, please.
Yeah, so the main guy in the 2022 class continues to be Xavier Nwangpada, Southeast Polk, 5-star safety on 24/7 Sports Composite. Iowa's in a pretty big battle there. Ohio State, Notre Dame are the two other schools pretty involved. And Iowa's made up a lot of ground as of late, obviously, with the performance that they've had the past 2 weeks. Phil Parker's defensive back end, they've been really good, and that's left a really big impression on Xavier. And, I know it's not a whole deal with him, but the NIL stuff and potentially staying home, that's something he's talked about, something, that's interested him. It's not the main focus, but it's an interesting aspect with his recruitment. And another guy on campus, too, was his teammate, 2023 5-star offensive lineman Caden Proctor, who has basically every offer that you could imagine. Every big-time offer. So he's another top target for Iowa in that class. It's kind of too early to say where things are at with him, but, it's one that Iowa is definitely going to make a priority in this 2023 class.
Well, it's so interesting because you've done such great reporting, you and David both, on freshmen, and we're going to get into that later down the year. This year's football freshman with Arlen Bruce IV, and you talk about Keegan Johnson and Connor Colby getting meaningful snaps. So we'll talk about that down the road, but you wrote a great piece on that. So let's finish out here in the last couple of minutes we have with you. Talk about basketball recruiting upcoming. We got a legacy recruit, a young guy. He's done 2024, but everybody, if you remember J.R. Koch back in the day, and we've had Kent McCausland on this show, and we will through basketball season, and former teammate of J.R. Koch was Kent McCausland. But let's talk about him, and then another kid coming to Iowa's looking at big time.
Yeah, so Cooper Koch, Peoria, Notre Dame, 2024. Saw him this summer a couple times, got to talk to JR for a little bit when I was there. And, yeah, he's a big priority for Iowa in this 2024 class. I know it feels like a mile away a lot, but he's a big priority and a guy that I was hoping to get secured early. It's not going to be easy. Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, there's the Dean Oliver aspect, former Iowa guard, assistant coach at Wisconsin. So that connection's there. So the Badgers are going to be a player, but Iowa's doing a good job early.
6'8" kid, and we all know JR was a taller guy, so he's a sophomore, could grow into a bigger body upcoming. And then who else you got? And then we got to say our goodbyes.
Yeah, so Council Bluffs, Lincoln guard, 3-star guard, Josh Dix committed to Iowa this past weekend over Wisconsin, Minnesota, Drake, and Wake Forest. So that was definitely a big commitment in the 2022 class. And Iowa's got a pretty good backcourt class with 4-star point guard DeSante Bowen as well. So the backcourt's in good hands, that's for sure.
Can't wait. Sean, great stuff from you as always. Look forward to catching up with you next week. Again, he is Sean Bock with Hawkeye Insider. You see all his information at the bottom of the screen along with mine. Sean, my friend, thanks so much. In a couple weeks, I said that last week, so maybe next week, but whenever we need Phil, because we've got a lot to cover as always. Thank you so much, my man, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
My pleasure as always. For Sean Bock, David Eickholt, Bill Happel Jr., Craig and Stacy Schroeder, and to you, the viewers, thanks for tuning in. Also, please stay tuned for just a second after the show here for the rolling credits to give our advertisers and sponsors the credit and attention they deserve. So for the aforementioned guests, I'm Dave O'Hara with Hawkeye. That's all from me. Thanks, all of you.